Oftentimes I'm asked to teach a class where the student needs to know how to draw. And the problem with it is they don't necessarily want to do concept art or things like that. And so here's a couple quick tips on how to create some concept art when you don't really have all the drawing skills you need to understand. All right, this is the easiest way to do this. And simply, I have a full body figure. In this case, I'm using a female, and I'm grabbing a whole bunch of reference clothing. And so what I'm doing is I'm essentially deleting the backgrounds of the clothing and other stuff that I don't need. So here you can see I'm just taking out the mannequin out and hitting delete. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer it over. I'm going to go to transform, Control T, and I'm going to right click and go warp. And I'm just fitting it to the body. And so you can see it doesn't quite fit 100%, especially since this is a male wearing this shirt and I need a female. So in order to fix that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the liquify tool, and I'm just going to use the bulge on it, and basically going to push apart the areas where the breast would be. So this is the bulge tool, and I'm just basically floating that out. And if you can't see, you can always adjust the opacity of things and kind of see how to adjust that. And then simply going in and just kind of adjusting a little bit more. Other than that, that's the first part of the process. Now you'll see me as I continue doing this, I'm grabbing the coat here, and the coat fits the character better from a opposite direction. So I flip it horizontal. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply cut this into several pieces. So I'm grabbing the lasso tool, and you can see here I'm just kind of lassoing out the parts. And I'm doing parts because it's going to be easier to form smaller pieces than it is going to be to form something more kind of try and form it as a whole object. So you see I cut this into 4 different parts, and including the 2 arms and then the 2 sides of the jacket. And then I'm going to just delete the background. And then what I'm going to do is simply kind of grab this and pull it forward. Now you'll see layers matter, so I need to adjust where my layer is at. You can see that it's up on the clothing here, and I'm adjusting where it goes. So just pulling down the shirt layer underneath the jacket layer, and then basically keep grabbing the other layers and kind of warping them on there. Now I do a lot of this rinse and repeat. It's warp, warp, warp. And the big thing about this is to essentially just get it to form close to the body. At this point, since you don't have the ability to draw, it's something that you can kind of work with and kind of play around with. Now this is great for modeling. This is great for putting together a concept that you can kind of work on and kind of build out, right? It's not real concept art by any means. It's just a way to get you to get a good reference. Now I'm taking the arm, and you'll see here that with the arm I'm kind of trying to warp it into a different way, and it doesn't necessarily work that way. So don't try and warp everything in place, and you'll find that it just doesn't work. So instead, what I'm going to do here is decide I don't like this, and so I'm going to cut it in half, and right click and cut, and then I'm going to warp it, and actually flip it and warp it here, and basically put it overlay the arm as one spot, and then I'm going to grab the other spot, and I'm going to rotate that and put that in place too. Now you'll see that there's some issues with the the arms showing through, and so essentially what I do is I just color pick, create a new layer on top of things, and I color pick and essentially just paint through. So you can see here that I'm just kind of roughing that in, and as long as it gives you the rough semblance of what you're trying to do, it will follow through. So you can see here I just did 2 color picks. I didn't like that little white spot, so I just erased that out, and essentially that becomes the jacket overlay. And the same thing goes on with the pants. You can see here that I'm going to transform the pants a little bit, and I'm going to rotate them because I feel they fit better this way. And again, just getting rid of the background white, and I'm going to select one body part here, so you can see that I'm just kind of posing it on the figure here, and I'm going to transform that particular section and fit it onto the leg. Now, using this method is not always going to work. A big thing is understanding where, and how your image is. So sometimes you will have to do more photo manipulation than anything else. And in this manner, you just kind of have to work with what you have. It's an easy way to do things, and it gives you the kind of base idea of pretty much putting together something concept art like. Now, you can do this. There's a ton of different things out there, armor, old medieval clothing and stuff like that, and you can honestly just kind of go through and kind of work with that. So you see here that I'm just essentially just kind of reshaping and resizing this and kind of building it out. All right, the next thing is I'm speeding this up a little bit more because it's a lot of piddly stuff. So the next thing I'm doing is essentially taking this and cutting out the boot itself, and getting rid of the white around it. Again, I don't care if it's destructive or non-destructive. I can essentially paint over this and kind of erase things out and kind of get a base going on. Same thing over here. You can see that I'm essentially just wiping this around and kind of cleaning it up. Now, one of the big things for this boot is essentially what I'm doing is I'm going to try to fit it accordingly. Now, some of it's going to be a little bit of a warp, and some of it it might need a rotation or something like that. And so you can see rotating it makes it look a lot better, and I'm kind of just adjusting accordingly. Same thing with the other side, but the other side is a little bit more complex because I didn't find the same style boot in the right kind of pose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to adjust it and move it accordingly. I'm essentially kind of warping it around and trying to fit that boot on there. Now, this works really good, and sometimes it doesn't work at all. And essentially what I'm going to do is here you can see that I'm kind of cutting apart the toe and adjusting the toe, and even then I'm not real happy with it. So what I'm going to wind up doing is grabbing the toe from the other boot after I'm done warping here. I'm going to grab that toe from that other boot and I'm going to move it over. So it's a big thing about just kind of grabbing bits and pieces and kind of moving it to wherever you need it. So you can see here, just by adding that boot on there, it feels a little bit better, and it's go. Now, the next thing is the hair, and I'm not going to do the ponytail thing in the back, but I'm just cutting out the hair, including the little scalp part of the head, and I'm going to make that a separate piece, and I'm just basically going to flip it around and kind of fit it on there. Now, you'll see it doesn't necessarily fit properly, different head shapes and things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically just try and warp it back into place. And if you still aren't happy with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the outer shape of the head and the ear here and the forehead, go back in, and I'm going to mask it. And I'm going to invert the mask so that that basically kind of comes around. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm actually creating a new layer, and I'm just color sampling and kind of cleaning it up, painting up so things blend a little bit better. And it's amazing how little detail you actually need in order to get things to work properly. Now, you'll see the only thing I have left is pretty much the guns, and you can see the arms I have up there. And so what I'm going to do with these particular guns here is essentially grab them, and I'm going to then desaturate them, and that's my base to work off of. And what I'm going to do is just kind of hand paint some basic shapes in there. at this point, all you really need to know is how to make a simple box in 3D. And then I'm just going to add some kind of quick designs. Now, this is a rough design, but it gives me essentially what I'm trying to look for concepting. You'll see here on this X gun, I'm doing very much the same thing. I'm going to just kind of trace around and grab what I want and desaturate that particular object. And then from there, it's basically, I'm going to use the background color and I'm going to paint that out. So I'm grabbing parts of that and pulling it out so that I get kind of the gun shape that I'm looking for. Now, the gun itself should be something that's completely done separately, and you can do this by doing the same thing as just basically bashing parts together to kind of get the pieces together. And so again, you can see here that I'm just kind of using the same kind of process and putting in some rough ideas and just basically giving the illusion that the gun is there. And this is kind of the start of kit bashing and things like that, and it works okay in most designs that we work with. Now, here's where things get a little awkward. If you don't know how to draw and you want to draw any type of thing on the face itself, you just have to realize that you have to understand the contours of said face. So in this case, all I'm doing is I'm just kind of painting a line right down the kind of side of the face, and I'm just kind of following the contours of like the bone structure. And again, this is a little bit more drawing. You might be able to find something like that, some type of tattoo or something like that that you can warp in place and make it look good. I just figured for this purpose, just to show you that it's really simple to kind of draw some line work in there and kind of clean that up. I'm then adding in some extra colors because solid black would just look too awkward. So I'm adding in some grays and some other things like that. And then finally, I'm just putting in some makeup on a new layer, and I'm using like an overlay method. There's plenty of makeup tutorials out there, but in this case, I'm just getting something quick and fast, and that's it. So that is essentially the methodology for creating new characters or character designs. You can do this pretty much with anything as long as we've got a genre for it. And so you can see here, I'm pretty much done. Now, if you want to like make it look a little bit more professional, essentially what you want to do is crop out the whole picture and basically apply that to a single image. And so you can see here that this is a simple and easy way to kind of make concept art. And I'm just kind of tweaking at this point and kind of playing around. So the next way to do things is basically grab some cartoon characters. In this case, I'm using some old Steamboat Willie and some hot stuff and a picture of a goat. And the big thing is when you start doing this, simply trace the existing character. And what you're doing by tracing the character is you're finding the shapes. And you can see here that I'm finding the basic shapes. Then what you need to do is you need to redraw those shapes. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm drawing the upper body, torso, and head, and then drawing the other entities in there. Now again, don't just copy the character. That's not what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to do is give you a base to work off of. So you can see here I'm just really kind of following line work over there. So that line work right now is the same thing as a steamboat, and I'm also doing a side view, but I'm grabbing the goat now and I'm looking at the goat and I'm kind of adjusting with adding in horns and things like that. Now the next thing I'm doing is that's when I'm trying to add in the details. So here I kind of like hot stuff's eyes, and then I'm going to kind of lower the opacity of everything, and then that's when I'm going to draw my actual character. So I create a new layer and I'm just tracing what I've got, but what I'm going to do is kind of follow the original designs of what I'm kind of mixing and matching together. So you can see here, I'm just putting in horns. I wanted a little beard on it, and I'm adding in the kind of boxers. I thought the boxers would be kind of interesting. So here I'm just looking at the thumbs of Mickey, or the fingers of Mickey, and I looked at a different frame too. And so from there, I'm just kind of adding in some rough shapes, and then essentially adding in kind of the shape of the pants and then the legs. And I'm really trying to follow the different ideas using different characters. So here I'm going to add in a little star on his pants. I don't know why I did that. I thought it was like demon type of thing, so it just stuck with me. And then finally, I've got my character done, and I'm just filling in some little bits and pieces here, but essentially follow the basic shapes and continue on and basically create your own character using someone else's character. And then finally, this is another way to do things. Now, this one requires a little bit more drawing ability, but essentially what I'm going to do is I'm doing somewhat the same thing. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to find the pose that I like, and I'm going to essentially trace over that pose. Now, with this, the big thing that we're looking for is making sure that our line work follows the form. Now, we can always exaggerate the form, and we can always, bulk out the muscles and things like that. But in this case, I am just simply trying to follow the form and kind of make it work. Now, the next thing after your form is done, you have a base character, right? We've all done this before. It's pretty simple. You have your base character, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to create a simple line work for this character, and this is basically the topology, so that I understand which direction things are going. And this helps you a lot, because a lot of people, when they draw straight through things, thinking that it has no shape and form. If this is struggling for you, take a paper towel tube and then just basically draw some circles around it, and then look at it in the angles of what you're looking at. Now, you'll see here that I grabbed some reference image again, and instead of pasting it and copying it over, I'm going to try and draw it. So the big thing about this is keep things very simple. So you can see here that essentially I'm using the t-shirt, and I'm kind of building it out. Now I'm just going through and looking at different parts, so you can see here that I'm grabbing some wrinkles and kind of putting them in there. And then the next thing I'm going to do is some pants, and I'm just looking at the wrinkles and the little bits and pieces and drawing them in there. This is like belt buckles, wrinkles, all that stuff. And this is skin tight, so I'm not jumping too far away from the form. This is for the people who have a better grasp on drawing. They may not be the greatest, but they understand some of the basics. And so what this does is it gives me essentially a base foundation of creating something with good proportions and some nice structurally sound concept art. And this is relatively fast, relatively simple. And essentially what I'm going to do is now I'm going to do the boots, and I'm just looking at the boot pattern and kind of adding in like the chains and adding in other parts. So I'm just looking at how things are put together, and I'm doing something very similar. And this helps me, helps anybody who's struggling with drawing as like a base foundation for every character design they want to do. They just need a foundation sometimes. And so this works really fast and really nice. In the jacket, the big thing about the jacket was I wanted the cuffs or sleeves kind of pushed up. And so with that, what I'm going to essentially do is push those up a little bit and then kind of drape that jacket down and kind of put in some bands, make sure the jacket goes underneath. And then I wanted a robotic arm. Now, the robotic stuff is a little bit harder, but keep it simple. Keep very simple shapes. And what I'm doing is I'm doing a cylinder. I'm creating a just kind of cover for it, like, and then adding some details. and again, they're all just simple shapes that are wrapped on that tube. And something like this, sometimes it's easier and nice to mock up things and just kind of build out from there. So you could easily grab a paper towel tube and draw some lines on it and then just pose it and draw it. Now for her face, I'm not really going too far out. I'm adding a little bit more makeup, and then I'm just kind of using some base hair to kind of give her that like 1920s style kind of haircut. Nothing fancy, just nothing outrageous, and essentially there's my character. And so these are some simple ways to basically create your stuff. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.